When retired Army Sergeant Evan Thatcher moved to Sunnyside Estates with his loyal service dog, he expected peace, not war. But behind every perfect lawn lies a secret, and when his dog is attacked by the HOA president, Evan pulls one thread. That unravels a web of corruption, control, and hidden crimes that no one in the community wants exposed. In a place where power disguises itself as neighborhood order, one man and his dog must take a stand against those who think they're above the law. Living in Sunnyside Estates was never my dream. It was a compromise between proximity and peace, and it offered both in just enough doses to make the deal worthwhile, nestled between quiet hills and a whispering stream. It was the kind of neighborhood that looked like a page from a real estate brochure, all crisp lawns and pastel shutters. The kind of place that promised order and quiet, where neighbors waved but rarely pried. For someone like me, that illusion of control was important. My name is Evan Thatcher. I'm 38 and a retired Army sergeant who served 3 tours overseas. I came back with more than scars and medals. I brought back noise, not the kind you hear, but the kind that lives behind your eyes, the kind that can snap your mind back to a desert road or a crowded market in an instant. That noise made it hard to be around people, hard to sleep, hard to trust. It made Maverick not just a comfort, but a necessity. Maverick is a golden retriever with a heart bigger than most humans I've known. He's more than a dog. He's my lifeline, trained to recognize signs of panic or distress. He'll nudge me, alert me, guide me out of a spiral before it tightens into something I can't climb out of. He wears a vest that says service dog, but that patch doesn't even scratch the surface of who he is to me. He saved me in ways no therapist or medication ever could. The first time I met Karen Whitfield, I had just finished planting spring flowers around the edge of my porch. Maverick lay nearby, observing birds with mild curiosity. His vest neatly secured his posture. Alert but calm, Karen marched on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, sunglasses like mirrored shields, and a posture that belonged to a drill sergeant, not a suburban committee chair. She stopped at the edge of my property, stared down at Maverick, then looked up at me. Don't believe I approved a dog in this community, she said, each word dipped in vinegar. He's a service animal, I responded evenly, covered under federal law, not subject to HOA pet policy. She made a sound that was somewhere between a scoff and a sneeze, muttered something about people finding loopholes, and scribbled on her clipboard before striding off the way she came. Maverick tilted his head as if confused by her behavior, and I gave him a pat, resisting the urge to laugh or curse. I should have known then that Karen wasn't just a busybody with a title. She was something far more dangerous, a person who believed rules were tools to be sharpened and aimed over. The next few weeks I received notice after notice, each more absurd than the last, the height of my grasp by less than an inch, a mailbox color dispute, my garbage can being visible for less than an hour after collection, all signed with Karen's signature, a curling, elegant scrawl that ended in a smiley face, as though that softened the aggression underneath. I complied, not because I agreed, but because I didn't want a war. Not yet, but peace has a price. And Karen wanted blood. It came to a head at the monthly HOA meeting held in the community center, a beige room with folding chairs and the faint smell of mildew. Karen presided over the meeting like a judge in a court of her own. Making her proposal was clear. All animals in the neighborhood, including service dogs, must be registered with the HOA and wear identification approved by the board. That contradicts federal law, I said, raising my hand and my voice calmly. The Americans with Disabilities Act doesn't allow local boards to impose those kinds of restrictions on service animals. Karen's lips curled. She cut me off mid-sentence and declared that federal laws don't override community standards. A few neighbors glanced my way, uncertain, but no one spoke up. Not yet. Afterward, as people shuffled out and Maverick sat loyally by my side, Karen leaned in close, her breath warm and bitter with coffee. If you want to be difficult, I can be difficult too, she whispered. I didn't respond, just held her gaze until she blinked. First that weekend, the sky was blue in the way it rarely is, quiet and open and full of promise. I sat on the porch with Maverick, reading, sipping coffee, letting myself relax in a rare moment of stillness. Then her shadow fell across Usker and stood at the edge of my lawn, spray bottle in hand. Your dog is violating the pet ordinance, she announced for all to hear. Maverick looked up but didn't move. His vest marked his presence as official. The rule hasn't been approved yet, I said evenly, and federal law still applies. He's a service animal, Care, and you're harassing me, and you know it. The face flushed with rage. I'm tired of you military types thinking you're above the rules. She stepped forward and sprayed Maverick directly in the face. He yelped, recoiling, his paw scraping at his eyes. I jumped to shield him, my heart pounding like gunfire. What the hell is in that bottle? I snapped. Just vinegar and water, she replied smugly. Maybe now he'll learn to respect authority. I wanted to scream, to hit something to make her feel even a fraction of what she'd done, but instead I scooped Maverick into my arms, carried him inside, and flushed his eyes with water, my hand steady only because they'd been trained that way. I examined every blink, every twitch, and when I was certain he was safe, I picked up the phone. The 911 dispatcher listened carefully when I explained what had happened. That Maverick was a registered service dog, that Karen had sprayed him intentionally, that this wasn't just harassment, it was a federal offense. Officers arrived within 20 minutes. 2 men in uniform, one with tired eyes, the other alert and watchful. I showed them the vest, the documents, the video footage from my doorbell camera that had captured the entire incident. One officer stayed with me while the other crossed the street to confront Karen. I watched through the blinds as her arms flailed, her voice raised, but the officer didn't flinch when they came back. They informed me she had confessed to spraying. Maverick claimed it was for community order and discipline, but the law didn't side with her. It sided with me, and with Maverick she's being charged, the officer said. Interfering with a service animal is a federal crime, and under state law, her actions constitute animal cruelty. Do you want to press charges? Yes, the word came out cold, and clean neighbors gathered as Karen was handcuffed. Some stared, others whispered, and a few looked satisfied. She shrieked about betrayal and loyalty, about how I was the problem, how she'd have me evicted, but the words fell flat against the rising tide of consequence after the squad car drove away. A woman from 3 doors down approached me. Her voice was low. I'm sorry we didn't speak up before. We've all been afraid of her for years. You did the right thing, I nodded, too tired to say much. Maverick pressed against my leg, his eyes clear again, his body warm and steady. The board called an emergency meeting the very next week, and the vice president stood behind the folding table, his voice shaking as he called for a vote of no confidence in Karen Whitfield. Every hand in the room went up, not a single objection. Karen's name tag was removed from the table quietly. Someone tossed it in the trash. The trial moved fast and loud. Karen arrived in designer heels and with a high-priced lawyer who couldn't spin the fact. The evidence was overwhelming. From the footage to witness accounts to the damage done, she pleaded guilty to reduced charges to avoid prison time. The sentence came down hard: 30 days in county jail, a $5,000 fine, 200 hours of community service at an animal shelter, and mandatory education in disability rights. She stood in court, trembling, her expression twisting as the judge delivered the verdict. The most important rule, Miss Whitfield, is to respect the law of the land, the judge said, especially when it protects the vulnerable, the ones who've already given enough. She was led away, silent this time, her eyes darted to mine, filled with something I couldn't quite name, regret, maybe fear, just the beginning of understanding. As the courtroom emptied, Maverick sat beside me, his head on my knee. I scratched behind his ears and felt the tightness in my chest begin to fade, but something told me it wasn't over. Not yet, because some people don't know how to lose quietly, and behind every perfect lawn, every clipped hedge, and pastel curtain there are secrets still waiting to surface, and someone was watching, always watching. The silence after Karen's arrest didn't last long. The neighborhood fell into an eerie kind of stillness, like everyone had agreed to pretend nothing had happened. Porch conversations ended abruptly when I passed by. Blinds twitched quietly as Maverick and I walked along the trail, but no one said anything directly, not anymore. They didn't know whether I was a hero or a target, and some weren't ready to choose, but Maverick sensed it first. The tension in the air, the watchful eyes, the unseen weight pressing down on our small world. He stayed closer to me than usual, alert, more cautious. He growled at shadows once or twice, something he rarely did. I chalked it up to stress until the night I found the note. It was tucked under my door in a plain envelope. No name, no stamp, just one sentence typed in bold caps. You think she was the only one? The word sank in slowly like poison. I turned the note over twice, sniffed for chemical residue, checked for fingerprints, old habits from old lives. Maverick watched me closely as I moved through the rooms, checking locks, reviewing footage. Nothing stood out, but I couldn't shake the chill in my spine. The next day, I visited the HOA office. It was mostly volunteers. Now, since Karen's departure had left a vacuum and everyone seemed more nervous than organized, I asked to review the official HOA rules and any amendments filed in the last 6 months. They handed over a folder reluctantly, and I sat at the metal desk with Maverick curled beside my feet, flipping through the pages. That's when I found a document labeled Sunnyside Compliance Enhancement Draft. Dated 3 months before Karen sprayed Maverick. It outlined proposals far beyond simple pet rules, including audio surveillance, permission on common grounds, gate access tracking, and a voluntary database of resident habits disguised as a community safety initiative. Most of it was marked confidential, some even signed off by board members who had since gone strangely quiet. One name stood out on the draft. Not Karen's. Russell Grange was the treasurer of the HOA and one of the few people Karen had ever deferred to during meetings. Quiet, well-dressed, always standing in the back with folded arms and a tight-lipped smile. I remembered once catching him watching me after that meeting, the one where Karen introduced the registration rule. His expression unreadable but sharp. I asked the volunteers where Russell lived. They hesitated but eventually pointed me toward Maple Bend Drive, a few blocks over. I didn't go right away. Instead, I went home, copied the documents, scanned everything into a password-protected drive, and left a backup on a USB hidden in Maverick's vest lining, just in case that night someone tried to break into my garage. Motion sensor light clicked on at 2:46 a.m. and my internal clock jolted me awake. I checked the feed and saw a figure in dark clothes trying the side door silently, deliberately when the light hit. They backed away quickly, but not in a panic. More like someone who didn't want to be seen but wasn't afraid. Either I called it in, reported the attempted break-in. The officer took notes, shrugged, suggested it might be a teen or a drifter, but I saw it in his eyes. He didn't believe that any more than I did the next morning. I visited Russell's home. He answered the door in a robe, sipping espresso like it was a lazy Sunday. "Not the morning after someone trespassed on my property, Evan. Good to see you," he said, without warmth but with enough politeness to mask whatever lay beneath. "What can I do for you?" I held up the draft proposal from the file cabinet. His eyes flicked to it briefly before returning to mine. "Interesting read," I said. "Do the other board members know you've been drafting surveillance policies and behavior tracking initiatives for a retirement community?" He chuckled softly. "You make it sound so sinister, Evan. This was just research suggestions. Nothing more. It was signed by you and stamped for confidential review." He shrugged. "Recommendations can carry signatures. It doesn't mean they were approved." Karen had a habit of overreaching. Maybe she thought it was a good idea. I never pushed. It stepped forward until we were nearly eye to eye. Maverick beside me, radiating tension. "You were the one who told her she could push those rules. You gave her the false confidence to challenge federal law, and she paid the price. Now you're trying to bury your involvement." Russell leaned in closer, his voice low and slow. "You're digging in places better left undisturbed. Soldiers, some roots run deep, and this neighborhood is built on them." He closed the door in my face with a finality that echoed. I walked back home feeling the invisible wires tightening around me. Maverick stayed at my heel, eyes scanning everything and everyone as we passed. A woman pruning roses looked up and quickly turned away. The mailman hesitated at my box and then placed the mail down like it might explode that afternoon. I received another note, this time slipped under Maverick's vest during our walk. It read, "We warned you." The last line had been scratched in red ink. It wasn't blood, but it wanted me to think it was. I went to the police again, this time with the documents, the note, and the footage of the escalating threats. They took it more seriously. A detective named Halloran assigned herself to the case. Sharp, no-nonsense, mid-40s, with a look that said she'd seen worse and expected better. She reviewed everything in silence, then asked a single question. "What exactly do you think you've uncovered?" "I don't know yet," I said, "but it's more than HOA drama. Someone is hiding something, and they're getting nervous." She nodded slowly. "I'll dig into Russell and his background, see if anything sticks. Keep a low profile. And if you see something, say something." But I had already seen too much that night. I awoke to the sound of Maverick growling, deep, low rumbling from his chest that meant something was wrong. I grabbed the flashlight and crept downstairs, my sidearm holstered but ready. Maverick led the way toward the back door, and there, carved into the glass with something sharp, was a word. No footprints, no sign of forced entry, just the message. And Maverick's raised hackles the next day. I didn't wait. I returned to the HOA office and found Susan, the interim secretary, pale and jittery. I asked her straight, "Do you know what Russell and Karen were hiding?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she slid a file across the desk, a file she wasn't supposed to have. It contained records of unreported fines, withdrawn fees, and property value manipulations, all routed through fake maintenance work and shell vendors registered to LLCs linked back to a quiet P.O. box in another city, and Russell's name was all over it. "You've been using the HOA to launder money, inflate property values, and control who gets to live here," she whispered. "And if someone refuses to play along, they make life impossible." I left the office shaken, but now with proof. I sent copies to Halloran and one to a friend in investigative journalism. Then I sat on the porch with Maverick and waited. I didn't have to wait long that evening. Russell showed up, not alone. Two men in plain clothes with firm jaws and empty eyes followed behind. He stepped onto my lawn, smiled politely. "This is your last warning, Evan. Walk away, or something unfortunate will happen to your precious dog." And then to why stood slowly, Maverick at my side. No leash, no command, just presence. I didn't speak. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and hit send. Copies of everything were now in the hands of the media and the police. Russell's smile faded, then disappeared. "You don't understand what you've started," he said. "This place was built on deals and secrets. You can't just blow that away with a file and a press release." "Maybe not," I said, "but I can make sure you don't hurt anyone else." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder and closer. Russell turned, cursed, and ran. His men hesitated, then scattered. Halloran's team arrived moments later, cuffed him on the sidewalk, and read him his rights. Neighbors watched from porches, eyes wide, mouths shut. In the weeks that followed, the story unraveled publicly. Headlines screamed HOA fraud scandal as local news and national outlets exposed the corruption. Karen had been the shield, but Russell was the sword, and behind him a trail of silent enablers who had built a fortress of deceit beneath the neat lawns and painted fences of Sunnyside. Russell was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, fined hundreds of thousands, and banned from holding any community office again. Susan took over the HOA and implemented transparency policies that made everything public. From finances to minutes to who bought the flowers for the entry gate, and I stayed because Maverick liked the trails and because I had earned this peace. The hard way sometimes at night. I sit on the porch and watch the sunset over those perfect rooftops. Maverick beside me, ears perked but relaxed, knowing the war in our little world had been fought and won. But now and then, I see a car pause too long or a figure linger just a second more than normal. And I remember Karen's last look and Russell's final words: you don't understand what you've started, maybe not, but I know one thing: when you dig deep enough into a perfect lawn, you'll always hit roots, and some roots are meant to stay buried for a reason, but some they are meant to be ripped out by force if necessary, and Maverick will always be ready. Moral of the story: true justice often begins with standing up when others remain silent. In a world where rules are weaponized and power hides behind politeness, courage means protecting the vulnerable even if you're outnumbered. Silence enables corruption, but one voice, backed by truth and resolve, can uproot even the deepest rot. Respect is earned, not through control, but through integrity, empathy, and resilience.